Could we come to order? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, and this afternoon we're continuing our pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2017 budget. We have 7 witnesses before us, and before we start, we have a vote tonight at 6 o'clock, which means when we're this far off the hill, we'll have to stop at 5:45. It just doesn't seem right to, because I believe there's 4 votes. It doesn't seem right to have people to sit around for 45 minutes or an hour to wait for us. So what I'd suggest we do is we tighten up this panel till 4:45. The next panel, 4:45 to 5:45, will limit questions to 4 minutes, and we'll limit the presentations, hold them tight to 5 minutes, and that way I think we can get everybody through without creating undue difficulties. I'm sorry we have to do that, but this is the way this place works from time to time. So to start and get everybody through as fast as we can, and hear all the good information they have for us on growing the economy and on the budget. We'll start with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Breakill.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, honourable members. C'est un très grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui.
Delighted to be here with you today.
Economy so far, I mean, just zeroing in on exports, take the first 7 months of this year compared to the first 7 months of last year, exports have fallen 3%. So we think by the end of this year we'll get back to about zero growth in exports, but so that would be our second consecutive year of zero growth in exports. So we're a little alarmed. And Canada's GDP overall will grow about 1% this year. Hopefully we'll get up to 2%, and so that's why the Canadian Chamber continues to bang on about competitiveness and how to improve Canadian competitiveness. And there's 3 main messages. You have a written submission which is more detailed with three key messages. Firstly, on infrastructure, we really want to emphasize the trade-enabling infrastructure, the export corridors. That's the kind of stuff that will improve Canadian productivity, help us to generate wealth so that we can pay for all of those other things that are so important. I think the second point is really on innovation. I mean, we think it's absolutely critical for Canadian competitiveness. The Canadian economy is not going to succeed by being low cost. We have to be more innovative, more successful. And so that's why we're recommending an innovation box regime. So if you produce a patent here in Canada, the revenues deriving from that product would be taxed at a much lower rate. We would love to improve the venture capital environment in Canada with an investment tax credit similar to what they have in BC. Finally, maybe more government investment in venture capital along the lines of the VCAP plan. Finally, on skills. Skills are absolutely the most important competitive advantage we have here in Canada. And so any improvements to the Express Entry program to make it move more quickly, to get employers the skills that they need. And, we welcome the findings of the HUMA report last week about, easing the temporary foreign workers, because those high-skilled people, those high-skilled jobs make Canadian business more competitive. So I'll stop there. Those are the 3 things we really want is on infrastructure, on more innovation, and on skills.
Thank you very much for those pointed points and for your brief. Canadian Home Builders Association, Kevin Lee, CEO, and Bob Finnegan, President. Bob?
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am the president of the association and a builder developer from Toronto, and I'll lead off and then pass the mic over to Kevin. Our industry has been a major source of stability for Canada's economy over the last decade, and this needs to continue. Residential construction supported over 1 million jobs, paid $58 billion in wages, and generated over $128 billion in economic activity in 2015, including over $41 billion in government revenues. Home building and renovation is a vital part of every community, large and small, coast to coast. So effective housing policy is key to supporting Canadians, business, and communities in achieving inclusive economic growth. To do this, we need to address a number of challenges. We must improve housing affordability for those in the middle class and those who aspire to join it. We must reduce greenhouse gas emissions through energy retrofits while curbing the underground economy. We must encourage and support those pursuing skilled jobs in our industry and the R&D that will bring innovation and increase productivity. And we must ensure that federal infrastructure and transit investment support housing affordability and the development of complete and inclusive communities. Today, I want to focus on the most pressing issue facing our industry and facing Canadians and facing the government, and that's housing affordability. I see the real impact of this every day in my business as young families realize that the modest home which they dream of owning is simply beyond their financial reach. Hardworking Canadians, especially our young people, must have the same opportunity to fulfill their dream of home ownership as previous generations. While our homes provide shelter and connect us with our communities, they also account for more than $4 trillion of Canadian equity, $3 trillion of that owned outright.
For a sec. We are going a little too fast on the wording. I know I said we
Okay,
got to rush.
sorry, okay.
But the
I can slow it
interpreters
down.
have to translate this as well. So
Okay. I'll start where I finished?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, CHBA is pleased that the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development are looking closely at housing markets to determine the true causes of house price escalation in our largest cities. Understanding the complexities involved is essential for smart and effective policy that avoids destabilizing markets. It is critical to recognize that in the face of growing demand for housing, many current government policies limit supply and drive up prices in other ways. It is encouraging that the federal ministers are seeking the collaboration and involvement of municipal and provincial governments, and such three-way collaboration is the only route to real solutions in the country. Kevin will now outline specific actions.
Thanks, Bob. So in terms of those specific actions, the federal government can take immediate steps to improve affordability and contribute to the prosperity of middle-class Canadians. First, Canadians must get the maximum benefit from infrastructure and transit investment. And to this end, the federal government should encourage its government partners to mandate appropriate densities along transit corridors and nodes. And the federal government needs to offer land write-downs for family-oriented housing and mixed-income, mixed-use, complete communities. Second, to assist first-time homebuyers, federal housing policy should support both stability and for housing markets and access to home ownership. Macroprudential rules that guard against financial system risks must not lock out well-qualified first-time homebuyers. Specific measures include support via the Homebuyers Plan, the continued availability of 5% down payment mortgages, and provision of 30-year amortization periods for well-qualified first-time homebuyers for homes priced under $500,000. Shared appreciation mortgages are another tool that should be explored to increase access to home ownership. Supporting first-time homebuyers is the key to healthy housing markets and a growing inclusive economy. Third, market rental housing is an important part of the housing spectrum, and modest revisions to how GST is applied would remove barriers to new market rental production. GST on new purpose-built rental developments is based on final value as if they were for sale condominiums, but should be based on actual project costs plus profit. Also, the current arbitrary application of GST on secondary suites discriminates between attached and detached units and favors renters who have a family tied to the owner. This doesn't make sense. Secondary suites are an innovative form of affordable infill rental housing favored by many municipalities, and they shouldn't be stymied by a federal tax policy glitch. My final comment concerns the need for a renewed home energy retrofit program to benefit the environment, improve existing homes, and help Canadians save money. In terms of climate change, housing is a Canadian success story. We have 38% more houses in Canada today than we did in 1990, and even with this, total residential emissions are down 11%. This has not come through codes, but from ongoing innovation and voluntary improvement supported by industry and government R&D collaboration. Moving forward, we will continue to build homes that are even more efficient, but more stringent codes that reduce affordability are not the answer because new housing is not the problem. The largest GHG opportunity lies in retrofitting existing homes, and a dollar invested in an existing home will yield 4 to 7 times more GHG reductions than the same level of investment in a new home. A permanent, refundable energy retrofit tax credit using the EnerGuide rating system will most effectively address the government's climate change goals related to housing. And by requiring homeowners to get receipts to qualify, our research suggests reduced underground economy activity can make such a program cost neutral to government. So I'll leave it there, and Bob and I will be happy to answer questions about these or other recommendations from our more detailed pre-budget submission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander with the Conference Board of Canada. Welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in your consultations. After contracting in the second quarter, Canadian economic growth is reviving. However, the pace of economic growth will remain modest, and it will take considerable time for the slack in the economy to be absorbed. This reflects the fact that Canada has a small, open economy. It is importing the weakness from the global economy through the channel of soft global demand and sustained lower commodity prices. While the Canadian economy weathers these cyclical forces, there are structural factors weighing down the trend rate of economic growth. The pace of growth in the long run is determined by either having more workers or using workers more productively. Canada's population is aging, the labor force is slowing. At the same time, labor productivity is weak. If Canada stays on its current track, the potential pace of annual growth in the economy will drop to well below 2% in the coming decade. This has far-reaching implications. It means Canadians will be frustrated by the fact that their standard of living is rising extremely slowly. It means businesses will be frustrated by the limited domestic growth opportunities. Governments, it means that national income growth will only be about 3.5% per annum. This will constrain tax revenue growth and limit fiscal capacity for economic and social imperatives. At the same time, the Canadian economy is being shaped by powerful forces of globalization and technical change that are fundamentally altering demand for workers in the labor market. Specifically, job creation for high-skilled workers will be strong, while employment opportunities for middle and low-skilled workers are likely to be poor. So what can policymakers do to help to foster stronger economic growth? Well, monetary policy is extremely and appropriately accommodative, but low interest rates will not be sufficient to propel robust economic growth. Further monetary stimulus through exceptional policies like quantitative easing or negative interest rates carry significant risks and, in my opinion, should be avoided. If monetary policy is stretched to a limit, this naturally leads to the question, can fiscal policy play a role in providing stimulus to the economy? I believe...
Craig, I'll get you to slow down
I'm
a little
sorry.
bit.
and back there, sorry.
Okay.
Targeted, timely, and temporary fiscal measures, such as investment in key infrastructure, have the potential to lift productivity and economic activity. At this point in time, there's little risk of crowding out private investment, which remains weak. The cost of debt financing is cheap. It should also be highlighted that investment in public infrastructure can not only boost economic activity directly, but it can also act as a catalyst for private sector investment. The key is to invest in the right projects that will have the greatest economic payoff over the long haul. I also feel fiscal policy can be used to address some of the social and economic implications of the slow growth and changing job environment. For example, displaced and temporary workers need better support. Canada needs to build the skilled workforce of the future. This means greater investment in education, including early childhood education and adult skills training. Canada has large pools of underutilized labor, including Aboriginals, immigrants, and youths. While there is slack in the labor market, it is remarkable that close to a quarter of employers report having shortages of high-skilled labor. These shortages need to be addressed with immigration, education, and skills policy. Older workers should also be incented to stay attached to the labor market for longer. Weak private sector investment has become a serial disappointment, which is limiting capital per worker and may weaken productivity growth. The latest Conference Board Business Confidence Survey showed that 1/3 of businesses felt that government policy was hampering investment. Reducing the regulatory burden, improving regulatory approval times for new investments could be advantageous. One measure that might improve business confidence is clear guidance on how and when the federal government will return its finances to balance. Without such information, Canadian businesses will worry about future tax increases, and I would stress Canada needs to maintain its currently competitive corporate tax rates. Canada is a trading nation, and it needs to lean against the rising protectionist sentiment that we see abroad. Policies to facilitate and expand trade are obviously critical. The bottom line is that there is scope for fiscal policy to improve Canada's economic and productivity performance. I believe many of these themes were present in the last budget and align well with the comments I made. Key investments in infrastructure and people can make a difference, but I also would stress you have to keep your expectations realistic. Much of the economic weakness is being imported from abroad, and domestic policy cannot change that. Stimulative monetary and fiscal policy can help support growth by adding a few tenths of a percentage point to the national growth rate, but I would stress that in the current environment, even a few tenths of a point matter. Running temporary deficits at a time the economy is struggling and adjusting to lower commodity prices is acceptable, but sound policy also includes returning to a fiscal balance over a reasonable time frame. With respect to budget 2017, I would like to suggest that the debt to GDP ratio is a poor fiscal anchor. As the government may have some control on the numerator, it has very little control on the denominator. I've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Turning to the Canadian Building Trade Unions, Mr. Blakey.
Thank you very much. Chris Smiley from my office is here to make sure that I don't undo any of his good work. So I'm getting graded for this. I'd like to thank the committee. The last time we appeared, you made a recommendation to support worker mobility from place to place. I would suggest with respect that what was vital before is more vital now. As well, you recommended $85 million for skills training for some of the stuff we do in the building trades. Thank you very much for that. We won't let you down. The building trades represents 500,000 men and women who make their living in the construction business. It's half of the construction workforce. We're a group that works in politics but isn't partisan. We hopefully are here to represent ideas and not things. We build everything from the greatest plants that are being built anywhere in the world through to your garden shed. Our workforce is in a pool. That is because every construction job comes to an end. Our work is transitory for workers, and it's transitory for employers. When the work ends, people move on to another job. One of our issues is workers and workplaces aren't always co-located. In Alberta and Saskatchewan, over the course of the last few years, we've seen a significant number of fly-in, fly-out jobs. They're still there, but there's a lot fewer of them. And where some of the work is going to be won't necessarily be in those locations. The infrastructure spend that the Government of Canada recommended in the last budget will be the construction marketplace in a number of places. You need to make sure we get a workforce to build the bridge over the St. John River or to build the hospital in Brampton. We need to be able to move that workforce. You have invested in skills training. The last Government of Canada invested in skills training. Skills training is something we can deliver. Tie skills training to the infrastructure spend. The fact is that we did a bunch of research in the days of the Construction Sector Council. Not having the money to travel is a major factor in people not moving towards the work. The current relocation tax doesn't work for construction workers, and no one is going to uproot their family to take a 2-month job at the other end of the country. It has worked, and it is useful that the communities across the country have been able to stay in existence with people who work away. So we're here asking for help. I said before, now is more important than any other time. We do get some help from owners occasionally moving across the country, but the truth is that the people we represent, the welder who doesn't get to deduct anything for traveling, if he were the welding rod salesman selling the product that he's burning, would be able to write it off. The person doing the work can't. So we don't care how we get there, whether it's an EI pilot, maybe that is the easiest way, whether it's a tax deduction or a tax credit. We will ease unemployment levels in hard-hit regions and support local communities and take skilled people to where the work is. You heard the Chamber talk about skills. You heard the Conference Board talk about skills. To be an apprentice, to be a dentist, you need a doctor of dental surgery. To be a lawyer, you need an LLB. To be an apprentice, you need a JOB. If you don't have a job, you're not an apprentice. We need to find a way to make sure that the young people that are coming into our business have a place to learn on the job. No job, no apprenticeship. You know, according to the studies done by BuildForce Canada, we are going to lose 25% of the construction industry and somewhere in the range of 35% of superintendents and supervisors as the baby boom generation fools people and actually retires. And that's over the next 5 to 6 years. So in an industry that's highly competitive and in fact combative, the idea of support for a mobility program, the National Construction Labor Relations Association, the Progressive Contractors, the Christian Labor Association, the Canadian Construction Association, we all support the idea of mobility. Mobility equals jobs. Jobs equals paying taxes, not being on POGI. Program to defer the cost of travel, pilot program, however we get there. The payback, according to the professionals we've consulted, is 5 to 1. Government of Canada does 5 times better than having someone on POGI at home, and we would support any monitoring or compliance programs that might be developed. Those are my submissions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. With the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Mr. Woodrick, welcome.
Good afternoon. Je vous remercie de m'avoir.
Thank you for having invited me this afternoon. My name is Erin Woodrick. I'm the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. For those who don't know us, FCC is a group of citizens established under a federal law. We have the support of more than 429,000 people in the country, and we have 3 main principles we work on: reduction of waste and taxes and responsible government.
Before this committee in February, prior to the last federal budget. And for the sake of the record, I will recount those recommendations very briefly as follows. To balance the budget, to create a legislated debt reduction schedule or budget line item, to end the double taxation of gasoline, reduce the political party donation tax credit, resist demands for any new sugar or fat taxes, pass truth in budgeting legislation, undertake a core review of all government spending, put an end to corporate welfare, control public sector pay and benefits, and finally, and it's a small one, overhaul the employment insurance system. So just a few small items to chew on there. Turning to next year's budget, this year's budget, the questions put to witnesses on how to best move Canada forward. Maximizing economic growth is, of course, a proper and commendable goal for any government to have. The debate, however, is about just how well placed governments are to steer that growth. This government, like its predecessor, is fond of taking an activist approach of selecting preferred companies or industries and then subsidizing them with tax dollars. I cannot stress enough that it does not matter whether it is General Motors or Bombardier or a small green technology startup. This approach is fraught with perverse incentives and unintended consequences. I understand that the intent of such subsidies is to help businesses and more specifically to protect private sector jobs. But an unfortunate hard reality of private sector jobs is that they either exist because they make economic sense or they no longer exist. Throwing tax dollars at a company to save private sector jobs means they actually cease to be private sector jobs. There is no getting around this. And this is not to say government should stand idly by when people are thrown out of work. There is a role for governments to assist people who are impacted by economic change. But helping the people affected is not the same as simply throwing public money at companies that are no longer sustainable in the marketplace. The Finance Minister has asked Canadians to think big. I should point out this need not always mean spend more. I appreciate that the government does not share the Taxpayers Federation's view on balanced budgets. But the government must still be mindful of the fact it is already running a deficit 3 times the size it promised during the election, and that it has also abandoned its timeline to return to balanced budgets, as well as its commitment to reduce the debt-to-GDP ratio. Earlier this week, the minister also seemed to be foreshadowing that the forthcoming fall economic update will not bring good news. I would caution the government against drawing the conclusion that even more stimulus spending is the solution, and remind them of Einstein's wise adage that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Perhaps the single biggest way the federal government can create new opportunities for Canadians is to expand access to new markets and remove the barriers to entry that exist in many industries. Some protected industries may not like this and will no doubt protest, but the government's responsibility must be to the broader economic well-being of all Canadians, not just industry incumbents who are afraid of healthy market competition. In particular, trade agreements should include provisions that seek to reduce or eliminate harmful subsidies that end up costing taxpayers of all countries and yet ultimately only serve to cancel each other out. In closing, we would, as always, like to reiterate our basic message to the government that it is very important to balance the understandable desire to help with the recognition of the limits of government intervention and the finite resources at your disposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With the Canadian Nurses Association, Ms. Poulin, and not too fast.
Thank you for this invitation to present on behalf of the Canadian Nurses Association, which represents 139,000 registered nurses and nurse practitioners in Canada. Like Mr. Blakely, I'd like to thank the committee for previous recommendations related to home care and to an accountability framework around the proposed new health accord. Our recommendations for Budget 2017 align with the federal government's priorities related to a multi-year health accord and to home care. Today, I offer 4 recommendations to address equitable and improved access to high-quality integrated health services for all Canadians. First, we are calling for the new health accord or related provincial territorial bilateral agreements to include a robust accountability framework or reporting system. Such a framework, which this committee supported in 2016, will benefit patients and taxpayers by showing causal relationships between inputs, activities, and population health outcomes. The framework would include reporting on health and social outcome measures derived from existing national data sources. Provincial and territorial governments would report to the Federal Minister of Health annually. Plain language reports could be made available to the public via Health Canada's website and social media platforms. Our second recommendation builds on the proposed investment of $3 billion in home care. Such an investment is urgently needed as there is persistent inequality in access to high-quality, publicly funded home care across Canada, while the demand for home care continues to increase. It is well known that home care is the preferred and cost-effective option for patients and families, costing a fraction of what hospital care costs. In 2013, over 1.8 million Canadians received publicly funded home care services. The majority of these services, over 70%, were provided to seniors over the age of 65. We recommend home care funding be allocated on a needs-based formula that accounts for demographics and population health. This approach will address the inequalities in regions such as Atlantic Canada, where currently 1 in 5 Atlantic Canadians are senior citizens. Economists at the Savoie Institute at the University of Moncton have studied the aging crisis specifically in Atlantic Canada, where they estimate the number of senior citizens will be 1 in 3 within the next 20 years. They predict the rising number of seniors, many with complex care needs, will lead to economic consequences for regions that already allocate upwards of 40% of their budgets to health care. Next month, CNA, along with our partners in the Canadian Home Care Association and the College of Family Physicians of Canada, will release a national report outlining specific actions for the federal government which build on those that I am describing today. These actions, focusing on scaling and spreading promising practices, on recognizing caregivers in a variety of manners, and advanced care planning were generated through extensive pan-Canadian consultation. Third, CNA calls for a national caregiver strategy to provide Canadians with flexible respite care and workplace options that afford job protection for working citizens. More than 8.1 million Canadians perform caregiving duties. Over 6 million concurrently balance this role with employment. The cost to replace unpaid caregivers with paid care providers would exceed $25 billion annually. In 2017-18, the federal government can take a first step in implementing a caregiver strategy by engaging with employer stakeholders to develop a federal tax measure to protect workers' incomes while providing supports and guarantees for workplace leave protection. Our final recommendation calls for the creation of a Commission for Integrated Healthcare. The Commission, which would have a 10-year mandate, would support the federal government's various interconnected health-related initiatives ranging from home care, palliative care, seniors care, Indigenous health, and mental health, and others. As part of its mandate, the Commission could establish guiding principles to achieve better health care for all and lower per capita costs. The Commission, which would complement the new accord, could be modeled along the lines of the Mental Health Commission of Canada. With that, I thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bullen. With the Child Care Resource and Research Unit, Ms. Friendly.
Thank you. And thank you very much for accommodating me, having me here today. I'm going to keep this really as brief as I can. You already have my brief, and I think the main point that I want to make is that the government has already made some commitments to a national policy framework for early childhood education and care. And I want to argue that that it should be done in concert with the right architecture in order to get the best results for children and families, for the economy, and for Canada. And I'm going to talk about a Canada-wide early childhood education and care system that has programs that are designed and managed by provincial, territorial governments and Indigenous communities. And this could play a number of key roles for Canadian families and society. So I'm just going to shorten my brief and conclude with a couple of proposals that we're making regarding the budget and the national policy framework. I don't think I'm going to go into descriptions of how dire the child care situation is for families across Canada. You can read that in the brief, and I write this all the time and speak to the media. And I think we know that there are shortages. People can't afford it. The quality isn't good enough to be educational, so forth and so on. And this is a real pressure on young families. This government made a number of commitments that were quite encouraging on the issue of child care. It was framed under the rubric of hope for the middle class. And the government, in coming in, they committed to developing a national early learning and child care framework, noting that every Canadian child deserves the best possible start in life, which many of us agree with. It's funded. The funding is under the Social Infrastructure Fund that includes a number of other important social issues such as housing. And I think the other commitment that I really want to flag that I think is important is that the government made a commitment to the policy framework being developed based on research and evidence-based policymaking, which I think is really important. This is very consistent with other directions of the federal government, including those of the finance minister. So I want to talk about what childcare could do if the architecture were right. It could be an opportunity for Canada. It could play a role in combating inequality between men and women, in increasing productivity in the long term, combating tension between social classes and between generations. Few people would disagree that Canada's support for families, women, and children is inadequate and has negative implications for today's young adults, like my daughter now, and in the future, as Generation Squeeze struggles with employment, with debt, with housing, and with family time. A national child care program would be a key piece in remedying Canada's women's equality record. As many have noted, the right answer to why should Canada have a universal child care program is because it's 2015 or it's 2016. And I also should remind you that early childhood education and care is considered to be a human right, not only for women, but for children. So I just want to talk a little bit about the first steps and what a policy framework could look at, and then I'll come to the recommendations. Currently, the government is working with provinces and territories, not yet with Indigenous communities, but maybe taking what could be the first steps toward transforming the current childcare patchwork to an early childhood education system, and has included funds for 2017 in the 2016 budget. Now, last year, a number of us who work in this area joined together to develop a shared framework and presented it to the federal government and to provincial and territorial governments, trying to show what an evidence-based policy framework could actually look like. And we framed it with 3 key long-term aspirational principles, and I think these are really important. The first one, it sounds a lot like healthcare: universality. Second one, high quality. And the third one, comprehensiveness, which means it is not one size fits all. It has to be varied to fit the needs of different families and different communities. So, and I guess the second thing that this shared framework calls for is a plan for long-term sustained funding, and so that policy and system development could be shared by federal, provincial, territorial, and local governments and Indigenous communities with the participation of key stakeholder groups, such as myself. So, with all this in mind, I'm pleased to put forward the following recommendations for consideration, and this is in the context of the negotiations.
Can you just list them, Ms. Friendly? We're pretty near at a time. Quickly.
Okay, that are already going on. First of all, we want to recommend treating the funds that have already been allocated for 2017 in the last budget as the first step towards an evidence-based comprehensive system. We propose transferring these funds to those provinces and territories that have developed plans consistent with the kind of shared framework that we're proposing that can be achieved over time so as to meet the objectives. And the second thing that I want to recommend, and this is where I'll wrap up, I want to recommend using the 2017 budget process to commit to the long-term sustained approach to federal funding that needs to happen over about a decade in order to develop the kind of child care system that we need to support all families and children. I think it needs consideration of earmarked funding. The money needs to ramp up over time. It can start out small, but over time it is an expensive program, and I won't deny that if you do it right and make it affordable. But I think that it's important to recognize that this is something that could really bring Canada a lot of benefits, economically, socially, and in terms of what happens in our society. So I just want to put forward those recommendations, and I hope I look forward to your deliberations.
Thank you very much, Ms. Friendly. Going to 4 minutes rounds, Mr. McKinnon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 4 minutes doesn't allow us to really fully explore all of the evidence you have so generously shared with us today. So, since it's the first question in our pre-budget consultation exercise with guests before us, I will zero in on the central issue, I believe, of the upcoming budget. We heard Mr. Brickle, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Blakey, certainly, and others speak to this dilemma: jobs without workers and workers without jobs. Growth that is slow, national productivity that is lagging, and I know that the government is faced with a situation where the participation rate in the labor market is low, historically. In my riding and elsewhere, there are individuals who are without jobs, and there's also this challenge, that of training labor, manpower for tomorrow. So, Mr. Brickle, Mr. Alexander, Mr. Blakely, very briefly, we only have 4 minutes, perhaps you could share with us your thoughts on this with us. Thank you for the question. It's Canada's largest challenge. We have 1.3 million jobless. And how do we integrate these people in the workplace?
Component of it is certainly in the training. And one of the things that we'd really like to emphasize is work-integrated learning, and having those co-op jobs to pull people from training programs, colleges, and universities, give them those temporary positions working in government. And so we would really like some sort of incentives to create more of those intern and temporary positions to give people that experience.
Of apprenticeship, which
exactly. Apprenticeships and work-integrated learning. Yeah. Mr. Blakely talked about.
I would concur. The apprenticeships and training programs are absolutely critical to developing the skills that workers need. I would also highlight the fact that we need actually better labor market information. We are making some progress on this file, but we haven't reached a point where we have the labor market information that businesses actually need. And if we actually had superior labor market information, we might be able to better address the skills mismatch that you mentioned in your opening comment. I would also stress that we also need to understand the nature of the changes in the labor market. So, for example, when it comes to temporary workers, there's a knee-jerk reaction that all temporary jobs must be poor jobs, the negative connotation. In actual fact, many temporary jobs are jobs being taken by older workers who are choosing to work in a temporary position. Sometimes apprenticeship positions can often get classified as temporary jobs because you're only going to be in that position for a period of time. So we actually need to understand the vulnerability and the weaknesses in the labor market. So in my mind, there's two issues. The first one is we need to help displaced workers who aren't working today re-engage in the labor market. And then number two, we need to help put in place the measures to support workers that are vulnerable, like temporary workers, even if they're doing it voluntarily. And then number three, we have to get the skills and education system right.
The Government of Canada is a significant employer. It employs a few tradespeople. It employs no apprentices, except in the dockyards, where the Navy has decided they're going to try and grow their workforce, and we happen to be the union. There's huge opportunities to promote the skilled trades in this country. The Government of Canada is going to spend $125 billion. Tell the people who are going to do the work, you can have this job, but you will guarantee us you'll train apprentices on the work. A number of sophisticated owners, Shell, Nalcor, Syncrude, Suncor, they don't have a problem doing that. And if you don't want to train people, take a hike.
You are at a time we're a little over time, but good discussion, Mr. McColman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses. If you could answer very concisely, I'd truly appreciate it, only having 4 minutes. So, Mr. Alexander, your comments on the weak private investment, which we've had reports that actually most companies have chosen to invest elsewhere other than Canada, the ones that are located here and are thinking of expansion, were government policy as a hindrance, lack of confidence, returning budgets to fiscal balance as being key to keeping that investments in Canada, because that ultimately leads to the fear of rising taxes. Did I hear you correctly in saying all those points?
Yes.
Thank you. On to the home builders. Talk about affordability. Can you share with us the load of taxation and regulation from the time a individual or a company has a raw piece of land till the time you hand the keys? Mr. Finnegan, you'd probably be good at this because you operate in the GTA. The keys to the owner, how much of a tax load and regulatory load of cost is part of the purchase price of a home in Toronto today?
Well, in Toronto today, it would be in excess of 20%. It would be made up mostly of, to start with, development charges and levies taxes, which would make up, in most municipalities today, between $60,000 and $70,000 directly paid by the builder that's added to the price of the house. On top of that would be further permit fees and charges made during the development process. It would add probably another $15,000 to $20,000. And then on top of that, there's the final HST figure, which is tax on a tax. So in those cases, that could be upwards of $100,000 based on the average.
I had one builder tell me recently in the Toronto area it was 50% of a cost of a house. So somewhere maybe between 20 and 50.
Depending on the final price of the house, and it's regressive. That a smaller house, less expensive house is a larger amount.
So it's not the builders and the developers who are paying that. Who's paying it?
The home buyer is paying it.
The home buyer is paying it. So when we talk about affordability, one of the things governments, I think, should do on all three levels, in my opinion, is to get a handle on the fact that the cash cow they believe housing is actually stopping the young family from getting their first house. Would you agree with that comment?
I would agree with that, yes.
You also brought up in your presentation something that alluded to, I believe, at the end, although you didn't use these words, but I will, because our government went down this road of a renovation tax credit. You tied it, I believe, to energy efficiency projects, things that would reduce greenhouse gases and things like that. Am I correct in interpreting that as what we had done previously, which was provided a renovation tax credit?
Yeah, the previous government did put in the home accessibility tax credit, and we would propose that for addressing climate change, the exact same thing can be done for energy efficiency.
Excellent. Just a comment from perhaps you, Mr. Alexander, again going back to you, on the fact that we hear statistics of Canadians being at record levels of debt, personal debt. 170% was the most recent numbers that I had heard. How does this have a larger effect on going forward in terms of the economic well-being, and what can governments do about that?
The high level of household indebtedness poses an economic risk in that if you had any sort of economic shock that would result in either higher unemployment or particularly higher interest rates, it creates a vulnerability on the household sector. Now, my understanding and my analysis of the real estate market in Canada suggests that even if you were to have an economic shock, the big risk isn't that Canadians would lose their homes like they did in the United States. I actually think the greater economic risk is that if you have rising interest rates, a greater share of personal disposable income will go towards servicing the debt, and that's money that isn't going into expenditure. And consumer spending is 60% of the economy. So in point of fact, the risk from the high level of household debt is that down the road, when we ultimately see a rebalancing of interest rates, you could actually take a very significant toll on the economy, in the sense that even small changes in interest rates will have a bigger impact on household finances than they have in the past. And this is why I think it's appropriate that the Bank of Canada has been flagging this risk.
Minute over. Yeah, sorry, Phil. No, you're a minute over. We're a little lenient on the floor. Mr. Cannon.
Monsieur.
Caron.
Merci.
Caron.
Merci beaucoup, témoin. 4 minutes.
Thank you very much to the witnesses. 4 minutes isn't long, so I would ask you to be succinct as well. Ms. Friendly, with regard to your third recommendation, you said that when we're talking about early child care, it comes under provincial jurisdiction. You recognize this, but you're also asking that the federal government take the lead, show the way, so to speak, lead the effort to attempt to bring all of the systems together. There's a patchwork. There are more systems perhaps in place in Quebec, but there's a whole patchwork of childcare services. How can the federal government play this role while ensuring that the provinces retain their jurisdiction in this area?
That is to think about health care. We have the federal government played a role successively in ultimately bringing in the Canada Health Act, and the federal government plays a major role, although, with setting the broad brushstrokes, if you will, the principles, and essentially providing the glue amongst the provinces and territories and the Indigenous communities in the case of early childhood education and care. It's not that there is a patchwork, but it's not that there's patchwork province by province, but there's also enormous patchwork by community and within communities. It's a market. So in order to kind of bring this together, there has to be some kind of glue. And I think from a perspective, I mean, there's different opinions about the way the Canadian Federation works, but it is definitely within the possibility that a federal government that makes certain commitments to its population. I mean, children in Quebec are really developmentally very much like children in Newfoundland and so forth and so on.
Et en fait, ça m'amène à Madame...
Ms. Bullen, You spoke about a leadership role for the federal government with regard to integrated health care. Same question for you. Health care falls under provincial jurisdiction. I fully agree that we should have a national strategy and that there should be concrete efforts made with regard to integrated services. But how can the federal government achieve this to be effective while clearly maintaining a provincial jurisdiction?
CNA has entered national consultations with the Canadian Home Care Association and the College of Family Physicians of Canada. And our specific question was, what are recommendations to the federal government around home care and integrated care? And we were able, through input from, in one form or another, from over 500 expert Canadians, to come up with specific recommendations in a number of areas. The first, to be very succinct, the first is the federal government could have a role through having an accountability framework or some kind of reporting mechanism around home care to make sure that the health outcomes that we're seeking to achieve are actually achieved. They could be very high-level population health and social outcomes, but nonetheless, we're ensuring that the money is spent for the intended purpose.
Rapidement, est-ce que vous voyez une ouverture des provinces par rapport à cette approche?
What about the provinces? Do you see the provinces being open to this?
Things are couched, but I can reference to similar accountability frameworks being put in place, for instance, in previous budgets around housing, and to our knowledge, that was accepted and effective. And I think since we all have the same goals and taxpayers and patients are looking for these services, they would be supportive of that approach.
Very short one.
Very short. Mr. Alexander, you were talking about investments and infrastructure. I don't have your presentation in front of me, but you said basically that we need to invest in those projects which brings the highest rate of return to the economy. Mm-hmm. I think we all agree on that, but what we might disagree is identifying those projects. Which ones are the ones who bring the most bang for your buck?
I agree. It can be problematic, but at the same time, there is a lot of expertise in the country, and we can identify where bottlenecks are taking place. So, for example, it is obvious that gridlock in the Greater Toronto Area actually comes with an enormous fiscal cost. Reducing the improved transportation infrastructure in the GTA can have a positive impact, both in terms of the short term creating economic activity, but also helping to facilitate private sector behavior. We see we see the same thing in terms of capacity, in terms of at borders. So, for example, the additional bridge at Windsor is a key piece of infrastructure to help facilitate trade. I'm discouraged when I hear about Canadian businesses shipping product in BC to ports in the United States in order then to ship abroad because there's limited capacity at Canadian ports. So, as a consequence, I agree that the challenge is finding the right projects. My hope is that given the profile that was laid out in the last budget that showed much of the infrastructure spending coming down the road, part of the delay was actually to help provide time to identify those right projects. And we will, only time will tell as to whether, how big, the bigger the economic multiplier we get from the infrastructure investment will inform us whether the right projects were done.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your presentations. Mr. Blakely, apprenticeships. This is something of importance to me. I've toured different trades in terms of their facilities, their training facilities, and that's all well and good, but then they really can't complete their license until they have that on-the-job experience. So I appreciate your comments about the federal government kind of showing leadership and leading by example. But what are you hearing from employers, let's say, in the trades, that what incentives do they need to actually start hiring? It's one thing for them to see the government acting in a certain way, but I suspect they would want more than that, because if it was really about doing the right thing and bringing the next generation up, I'm sure many of them would do it knowing their own experiences.
Given the crass nature of humanity, things like the apprenticeship incentive grant brought in by the prior government, the apprenticeship completion grant, those sorts of things go a long ways to making people understand that apprenticeship is actually a valuable commodity. The other part of it is the Government of Canada could easily role model the advantages to consumers and the advantages to employers in having apprentices. There have been a number of studies done by people like the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, which will say that for every dollar spent on an apprentice, the return to an employer is $1.67. We shouldn't be limited by what we perceive to be the facts. We should actually have a chance to look at what the facts really are. And the facts for apprenticeship, the fact is, it's older than universities. It is a 1,200-year training system, which has really continued with the contract of indenture being roughly the same as it was in the year 800. It must be doing something right.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, Mr. Finnegan, of course I'm going to ask a question of Building Home Builders Association, given my former background. My colleagues' questions about affordability, it's somewhat interesting and ironic when you talk about levies, municipal levies, because in Ontario, for example, it's the only province where municipalities actually pay for housing. So levies that are collected through building applications, part of the municipal tax roll, and then have to go pay when the Harris government downloaded social programs like housing. So we actually have to pay for social housing through property taxes as well as things like municipal levies. Same with transit, same with childcare. So it would be my assumption that these would be the types of things that you can't do one without the other. You can't reduce levies for home builders without providing funding for the services that are needed. So the investments that the federal government has announced in terms of transit and sanitary wastewater facilities, I would think the home builders associations would see this as a major plus, because if you have these services to land, that's only going to increase value and help take the burden off so that levies don't continue to increase.
We've certainly been hugely supportive of investments by government in core infrastructure to address affordability and alleviate the need for development charges and taxes. Our concern with development taxes is when they go beyond the needs of the immediate units and start funding things that go far beyond those immediate units and the rest of the community, which would be typically something that ought to be paid by the more broad tax base so that everybody benefits from it. The same would hold true for social housing units. You really don't want to just force new home buyers of new homes, to be the ones who are financing social housing units. Ideally, society is financing social housing units, and you're still not saddling particularly new first-time home buyers with having to pay for social housing, and that's where we would look for a different approach to things.
Thank you, Mr. Leipert.
Mr. Alexander, I think that I don't think there'd be a lot of argument around the table relative to the conference board and your ability and history in terms of recognizing where the country is headed and being nonpartisan. You know, there's a lot of concern being expressed today about the debt load, not only of individuals in Canada, but also governments when you take provincial and federal government. There's some speculation that after the federal election in the United States that there could very well be an increase in the Fed interest rate. Where do you see all of this sort of coming to a head? Because as we get presenters, we get probably 10 people asking for more expenditures and none who say how we could actually reduce expenditures. So I'd be interested in your sort of summary of what kind of a mess we really are in.
And you want it very succinctly.
Yes.
The outlook for the Canadian economy is one of very weak economic growth at a time where there is slack in the economy. So I think you can make a case that when private sector demand is weak, some targeted fiscal stimulus can have a beneficial impact. But at the same time, you have to be fiscally responsible. And in my mind, fiscal responsibility in this context is to chart a path as to how you will eventually return back to balance. When I think about Canada longer term, and I look at long-term projections, I am concerned about where Canada is headed fiscally. And primarily, my concern is at the provincial level. Because when I look at projections of economic growth and income growth in the economy, what I can see is healthcare expenditures are going to far outstrip fiscal capacity. And while some provinces today have fiscal challenges and others have less, any long-term projection of provincial fiscal situation basically leads you to a conclusion that you are going to see very large deficits at the provincial level for quite a long period of time. This then raises the question: how are we going to deliver the health, education, other social programs at the provincial level and have them affordable? Obviously, one approach would be to look at fiscal capacity of the federal government in terms of the ability to transfer tax points to the provinces. So when the question came up about education, healthcare being a provincial responsibility, one of the observations would be perhaps the federal government should be looking for ways to transfer fiscal capacity to the provinces, or alternatively look for ways of tying the or channeling fiscal room. But at the same time, as I said, these are long-term pressures. So if we run up a lot of debt now, we are going to lose scope and room to maneuver to meet the fiscal pressures that are going to come down the road.
Well, and I'm sure your colleague to the left would say there's only one taxpayer.
Yeah, I echo some of his comments. I would disagree with some of them. I think when we talk about stimulus, we do have to be conscious of the fact that the impact of fiscal stimulus is greatly mitigated in small, open economies with a flexible exchange rate. So there is that. The other thing, too, is to bear in mind that we have seen this movie before. We have tried, and it's usually in incidences with the previous government where there is, in fact, a recession. So, we were not fans of the last of plunge into deficit. We're not fans of this one, but at least last time you could argue there was, in fact, a recession.
Well, and there was stimulus versus significant increase in expenditures on social programs versus stimulus infrastructure spending, which happened in this last budget.
Yeah, whether it is temporary or not is going to obviously have an impact. And as hard as we were on the last government for going into deficit, we gave them credit for getting out. And that is our concern with the new government, is they have signaled they're going into deficit, but we've yet to see a plan to get out.
I have to cut you there. I do have one question I want to ask the home builders and anybody else for that matter. And it was mentioned in somebody's presentation, and that's the renovation black market. I mean, there's three... there's lost revenues for government, there's the undermining of the construction industry itself, and there's loss of guarantee for those people that use cash, payment in cash to those people doing the renovations. How do you kill that black market?
We're doing a lot of work in this area on actually information for Canadians. We have a Get It in Writing campaign right now that we're actually collaborating with Revenue Canada on. It's been on for many, many years, but has been reinvigorated over the past couple to educate Canadians about making a smart choice when it comes to renovation, because, as you said, everybody loses, frankly, including the homeowners who are choosing to go this route in many instances. And it's one of the reasons why, when we look to activities like what are you trying to achieve from a public policy perspective, for example, climate change, for example, aging in place, for example, even helping first-time homebuyers through a renovation tax credit for a first-time homebuyer, even. All of these things, it doesn't take much. As long as you have a program that requires a homeowner to get a receipt, you in turn then attack the underground economy. And we saw it through the home renovation tax credit in 2009. We saw it through the Eco-Energy Retrofit Program for energy efficiency. When you get a homeowner to take a receipt, and it doesn't have to be a receipt for much, as soon as you get the receipt, the underground economy dries up. And so tying social or other policy to things like the renovation side of things to achieve those dual benefits is a great way, and as we've calculated, this can practically be cash neutral for the government. Tax credits, grant programs are often looked at like as a straight expense. That's not the case when you are bringing underground economy activity above board in the process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graywell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You took my second question, so thank you for that on the cash-only deals, and thank you, Mr. Lee, for going into more depth into that. My question is going to focus on Mr. Hendricks' testimony. You mentioned the importance of the express entry program and immigration. Can you please give us a real-life example? Somebody a business that you're dealing with that is struggling because of this program, because immigration is holding up their workers.
We sometimes we have frankly it's the biggest issue for our members, and it's a little bit difficult to cite specific ones, but like in the video game industry in Montreal, where they're trying to bring in highly skilled workers, and they have to prove a labor market impact assessment to say there is nobody in Canada that has the specific skills and programming to do this thing. Some of the, like in Ubisoft, some of the higher level stuff that they're doing, there's only 15, 20 people in the world who are really good at this stuff, so they're bringing that specific person, and then they hire a team around them. And so the biggest challenge, I think, is the LMI, the labor market impact assessment, proving that you can't find any other Canadian who could do this specific job.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the Minister of Immigration now understands this. A lot of it's been with the feedback that MPs have been getting on the ground. Immigration is a big issue in my riding, and the labor market impact assessment is something that all employers and permanent residents or people here on work permits and student visas that are trying to get jobs are complaining about, because the process isn't is very flawed and very bureaucratic. So we've passed that information along to the minister, and we're very hopeful to get some positive results on that to ensure that we can get these talented people into Canada, helping Canadian businesses grow the economy. So thank you for your testimony on that. I really appreciate that. Going on to housing and home building, one of your recommendations was support increased access for the first-time home buyers program. Housing is a big concern, whether you're in Vancouver, whether you're in Toronto, whether you're in Montreal. In the GTA, I come from Brampton East, which is a high growth area right now, and the price of houses in my riding from last year to this year has gone up by 25%, and that is just putting out of reach. And I'm 31 years old. All my friends are now getting into good jobs. They finished their master's degrees, and they have upper middle class incomes, in my opinion, but they can't afford a house where they grew up. So this is a massive challenge, I believe, not only for the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal governments. Some further insight in one thing that you would like to see in this budget that would help address that problem.
The first thing to understand, especially in the GTA and in Vancouver, is the number one thing driving the problem right now is lack of supply. And Bob and I, just before coming over here, we were just looking at the latest stats, and there are 70% less low-rise houses on the market in the GTA at this time this year than there were last year. New. And so when you want to talk about simple economics and supply and demand, the reason why low-rise houses, in particular in the GTA and in Vancouver, are so expensive is supply and demand. And so there is the Fed, Prov, municipal action right now to study housing markets, and we're really glad for that, because there's been a lot of misinterpretation of what the problem is. So really, some collaborative effort on addressing that, and making sure also that Bob has also talked about the level of taxation, development charges in the GTA. I mean, when you're talking about $150,000 of tax on a $500,000 home, that's an exorbitant level of tax. And so some collaboration between all three levels of government to deal with supply issues, to make sure taxation is appropriate, and the investments in infrastructure, which can help offset that and create transit corridors that will enable people to move more efficiently. It's about productivity, it's about quality of life, all these things. Those are some areas that can make a big difference.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I totally agree with you.
Cut you there. I'm sorry.
I know,
over.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Raj. Mr. Albutev.
Well, thank you very much. I think I've got a couple of questions to Mr. Brakel, and I'm going to focus a little bit on productivity versus your proposal to increase investment in skills and in education. So in the absence of jobs, I mean, unemployment rate is increasing, and we do seem to have problem picking up the economy because of job creation. So we, as far as we've seen so far, there is no job creation policy or strategy that we have in place right now. And asking for investment in skills and education has to do with a complete strategy of job creation. So how do you see that's going to work together? Also in the lack of productivity, which is its known problem in Canada probably for the longest time.
Sure.
Mr. Brakel, I guess.
Oh, sure. No, thanks very much for that question. I think the challenge is, when we look at how to improve productivity and growth in Canada, as Craig alluded to, it's not just a Canadian problem. The OECD is looking at all the rich countries and saying we're sort of stuck in a low growth trap. And so how do we get out of that? And so they have a specific menu of investments and things that have a high multiplier. And so we can sort of look at specific education programs, specific infrastructure spending, which does create those higher productivity investments. And I think really the investments in skills and innovation is the stuff that's going to have the long-term benefits for the Canadian economy. So it's a whole lot of things to get to the point.
So when we look at the labor market, we have an interesting dynamic. We have businesses that say they're not really willing to invest in the current market, and about half of them are saying they're not willing to invest because demand is weak. Well, you can certainly understand that from a micro level. If you're an individual company, you don't have orders coming in, you're not going to invest in a lot of additional capacity, you're not going to grow, you're not going to expand your labor force. So the lack of demand is a functional challenge. It's very difficult to deal with because, as I tried to emphasize, a lot of the weakness that we have in Canada is actually because we're a small open economy and the world economy is having a difficult time. However, you then get some interesting observations about some of the things that are taking place. So, for example, we are seeing more industries that are actually bumping up to capacity, into capacity constraints. Well, surely businesses that are running into capacity constraints should be investing more in capital and also hiring more workers to expand their business. But they're not doing it. Now, last week we had a speech from Bank of Canada Governor Poulos, who emphasized that maybe businesses need to lower the rate of return that they expect on investment in a low rate environment. And I think that there's an element of truth to that. But we shouldn't put the onus just on businesses because there are barriers to investment and growth. And one of the examples that I tried to highlight was the fact that you have about a quarter of employers that are actually saying they can't find the skilled workers they need. Now, there's two ways of addressing that. In the short run, you can bring in foreign talent in order to fill those roles to allow the growth. But at the end of the day, what you really want from a long-term perspective is you want the education system and the skills system to actually create workers with the skills that the businesses need. And so I think that the productivity story is all connected to this, because your economy is not going to be productive if businesses aren't investing, and your economy is not going to be productive if businesses can't find the workers with the skills they need.
Well, okay. I think bringing investment on board into the country. I mean, you can't ask business to lower their expectation of profit, because if they lose money, they can lose big, and that's a risky road for them to take. So how can the government expect, or what can the government can do instead of spending or investing our own money and having the private sector to do so? What can we do? I mean, lowering tax on business is one of the solutions, I guess, in that fashion.
Well, I think Canada has very competitive business tax rates. I think there are other barriers, though, to investment and growth. The regulatory environment is a good example. I'm going to give a provincial example. One of the things I was a little surprised by was to find that Ontario has twice as many regulations as BC. Well, I actually think BC is a well-regulated economy, so why does Ontario need twice as many regulations? Right? This to me shows, illustrates an impediment to growth.
Cut you there. Last question, Mr. Sabera.
One question?
No, you got 5 minutes.
Oh, well, that's great. Okay. Or 4 minutes. Okay, let's use it efficiently here. Let's see, where do we start here? We'll go to the Chamber of Commerce first. Productivity in Canada, we know where we're at. Job growth has not been strong. We need to get this inertia. I'm going to call it inertia out of our system, and get us going again. On the innovation side, and innovation's a cliche word. What would you recommend me? Just two policies or programs that you think with innovation we could hit a double or a triple or even a home run?
Well, thanks. Canada's very good at research and development. We have incredible universities. We're really good at R&D. The challenge is we don't commercialize enough products, and so really it's to have those incentives to have big businesses creating products here in Canada. So that's why we recommend the innovation box. That if you build a product, if you create a product here in Canada, some sort of patent, that the taxes on the revenues coming from that patent would be taxed at a much lower rate. The other thing we think is incentives in venture capital in order to create that sort of that group of investors that reward new companies and startups. And we think the investment tax credit in BC would be really helpful. We also think maybe an exemption on certain capital gains, like we exempt capital gains of TFSAs. Why not exempt the capital gains if you're investing in a high-risk startup?
Okay, we can further talk about. On to the Home Builders Association, and I live in an oasis. I live in York Region. I'm from York Region, and it's busy. The builders are very busy there, but the problem is there's not enough tradespeople. And this is like this catch-22 situation where we don't have enough tradespeople, but we got people that aren't working, and even the folks that are being unemployed in Alberta that unfortunately have lost their jobs, even the folks that are returning to Ontario aren't sufficient. And you're not just going to move from Alberta to Ontario because the price of housing, and to resettle in Ontario from Alberta, there's a little discrepancy there because it's very expensive to move into York Region, some places in Toronto. So I've been pushing in terms of how we get more young people into the trades, and I call it, the term I once heard was parity of esteem, if I can use that term. Are there any pilot projects that we can advocate for, latch onto? Because I think in the next 10 years, maybe even less, and I have great relationships with both the builders and the unions, and I hear it from both sides. I think next year we're going to lose not even the labor, we're going to lose a wealth of experience that just isn't there. It's like losing that senior management, but you have no middle managers coming up the ranks that are learning, and we need to do something about it. And I know this is provincial, federal combined, but there's got to be something we do. So can you spend 20 seconds on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. We're going to lose 118,000 workers over the last decade in residential construction. Some of them are apprenticeable trades. Some of them are not. A lot of them are just skilled workers, and that's common in every industry, and so what we need to do is encourage people to get into skilled work and skilled trades. We're doing work with Colleges and Institutes Canada. There is a role for the federal government to promote that kind of thing and guide people, and not as a second choice. You don't go to college to study a trade and get into skilled work because you couldn't get into university. You go there because it's just as good as going to university.
The remuneration for a welder, a carpenter, foreman is actually a lot better than a lot of the other occupations people may think about. Mr. Blakely, I will continue to advocate for that mobility
Thank you.
program.
Thank you very much.
I think it's something worthy we need to look at.
The thing you said about parity of esteem, I have 4 university degrees and 3 journeyman's tickets. The journeyman's tickets actually mean I can do something. The others are nice to have.
My father was a sheet metal worker and a carpenter, and he's retired now and stuff, so I understand where you're coming from. Mr. Alexander, I do disagree with you in terms of the fiscal anchor being debt to GDP. I do, as an economist and someone that's worked in finance for 25 years, I do look at debt to GDP as a ratio for financial flexibility in across the board, whether it's G7, G20, or whatever measure. But your comment on labor productivity being weak, I agree. Would love to hear your comment on the investment climate and how we can make sure that's going the right trajectory, which I think it is, but it always can be better.
If you can sum that up in about 30 seconds, it'd be great.
30 seconds. I strongly believe that a roadmap as to how the federal government is going to balance the books would be helpful from a business confidence point of view. I think there are concerns on the part of businesses when governments are running deficits. They aren't concerned about the fact that a government runs deficits if it's financially sound. They worry about the potential that down the road it could ultimately lead to higher taxes. And so I still would argue that one way of improving business confidence is actually lay out a roadmap as to how to balance over a sensible length of time. On the debt to GDP, very quickly, I actually do think it is something that tells you about fiscal capacity. And as I said, in the current environment, I do support targeted fiscal stimulus. I just think the debt to GDP ratio is a poor fiscal anchor. And so it's the language and the focus that's used, and that's why I think it's really important to lay out a plan and a trajectory that will get us back to balance over the medium term.
Thank you very much. My apologies for tightening it up a little bit, but I think we had a lot of information put on the table. Thank you for your submissions that you sent in as well. They are being read, and there's analysis being done on those as well. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll suspend for a few minutes, and the next group can come forward. All right, we'll reconvene, and as folks know, we're doing the pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2017 budget. I do thank you for coming, and and thank you for coming a little early. There will be one more to come, I believe. We are tightening up the afternoon schedule a fair bit because there is votes in the House about 6 o'clock. And rather than have you wait for us to come back and question, we are trying to fit everybody in, go to a little shorter, more concise questions, and get everything we can in the record that way. So if you could hold your remarks to 5 minutes, that would be helpful. And my apologies, I have to leave about 5:15 as well for a debate in the House. So we'll start with Polytechnics Canada. Ms. Robinson, welcome.
Thank you. Low economic growth does not have to be Canada's fate, despite the rapid changes around us. But low growth is our destiny unless we change with the times. Technology has changed the global economy, our demographics, our workforce have changed, yet our policies for data, talent, and innovation largely remain the same. We need data that can tell us not where we were 5 years ago, but where we are now and where we are going tomorrow. We need fewer programs for Canadians to get a general education when they want a specific job, and more programs that give the specific knowledge and know-how they need to get the jobs they seek. We need an innovation strategy that doesn't tell firms that they need to work to commercialize more ideas, but listens to the ideas on how commercialization actually works. It's time to do things differently. A polytechnic institution does do things differently. It combines the practical hands-on approach of a college education with the in-depth study usually associated with university programs. Our graduates have seamless transitions from education to employment, fostered by experiential learning opportunities. Polytechnic applied research is driven by solving industry-identified problems with industry-friendly IP policies. My association represents leading research-intensive, publicly funded polytechnics, colleges, and institutes of technology. So our thanks, Mr. Chairman, and committee members for having us here. While our written submission and recommendations in front of you are specific, I will now speak to the higher-order challenges they address, our call for action on data, talent, and innovation. Let's start with data. Economics 101 tells us that successful markets need good information. However, we are failing to successfully produce the necessary data to match people to skills to jobs. We see stalled startups who think they have to look abroad for expensive talent, and cohorts of young people trained in Canada's best institutions working jobs far below their skill sets. In short, poor information results in poor public policy and in market failures. To solve this problem, we need to better leverage and share existing data about the labor market and invest in gathering data to fill the glaring gaps all Canadians face when forecasting the jobs and the job market of the future. Next, talent. Canada urgently needs an inclusive talent strategy that moves past elitist and hierarchical notions of what education and training should be. Best and brightest must now apply to all types of graduates in all professions and vocations. Much of our innovation gap is an education gap. The lack of alignment between the employer demand for skills and the supply of graduates in the labor market is a long-standing challenge. Today, it takes longer for young people to launch careers or existing workers to launch second careers, even while firms struggle to find the talent to compete and innovate. Our submission recommends several measures to begin to fix our talent ecosystem. Finally, innovation, a topic that is getting much attention today, as it almost always has when discussing Canada's productivity and aspirations for growth. Yet we continue to erroneously conflate innovation with breakthrough science. And thus we have failed to develop distinct strategies for either. This is the recipe for underperformance. We have invested heavily, but failed to get the desired results for business, for research, or workers. Canada's innovation performance is subpar because we lack policies and programs that respond to industry demand for innovation. Instead, we push ideas, graduates, and programs on industry that aren't aligned with their needs and won't help them grow. In particular, many small and mid-sized firms want to innovate but lack the supports they need. Others require time-sensitive solutions to their innovative ideas. Polytechnics excel at providing these kinds of supports, yet they receive only 1.7% of total federal support for higher education R&D. It's time to ramp up the supports to business by utilizing the innovation capacity of polytechnics and colleges. A polytechnic education builds a resilient and resourceful workforce, to quote the Prime Minister. Our recommendations go against long-held Canadian orthodoxy, but different approaches to data, talent, and innovation are needed to avoid a destiny of low growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Turning to the Canadian Urban Transit Association, Mr. Leclerc.
Monsieur le Président, chers membres du comité.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, first of all, I wish to thank you for the invitation to appear before the Standing Finance Committee of the House of Commons. My name is Patrick Leclerc, and I am the President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Transit Association.
An influential voice of public transit and integrated urban mobility in Canada. Our members include transit systems, manufacturers and suppliers, government agencies from coast to coast. CUTA members represent over 95% of total transit ridership across the country. The Canadian transit industry is a $14 billion industry that employs about 75,000 people. First, I'd like to recognize and thank the Government of Canada for the increased role it's played in public transit over the last 15 years. The investment generated a number of spin-off benefits, such as greater access to high-quality jobs, social inclusion, a cleaner environment, healthier and more sustainable communities. It's through long-term and dedicated investment that local government can build dynamic and vibrant communities. The recent Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, worth $20 billion over the next 10 years, as well as the permanent $1 billion Transit Fund announced in Budget 2015, are exactly the kind of funding that we need to face the challenges of urban growth and an aging population. In order to leverage this unique opportunity to build sustainable communities for the next generation, CUTA recommends the government convene an expert advisory panel to help establish program parameters of these new funds. This panel would work hand in hand with the government to find the right balance between flexibility and industry best practices to ensure greater transparency and accountability in the way these funds are invested. One of the key concepts that should be at the heart of the new transit infrastructure program is transit-oriented development. By building transit-oriented communities, active transportation and public transit play a greater role in connecting people, including the most vulnerable ones, to employment opportunities, educational institutions, and healthcare facilities. The economic case of investing in transit has been demonstrated time and time again. For instance, in a study conducted by the University of Toronto, Stephen Farber found that people living outside of the downtown core of Toronto can access only 5 to 10% of the job car owners have access to, and less than 5% outside the city of Toronto. According to Farber, the key to closing the gap in accessibility to jobs is in beefing up public transportation. In addition to providing greater access to good quality jobs, public transit helps the middle class save money that can then be reinvested in other areas of the economy. Transportation is the second largest expense of Canadian households. While transit alone may not be a suitable option for many Canadians, it offers the opportunity to millions of Canadian families to own only one car instead of two, which help them save about $10,000 annually. Another economic benefit of investing in public transit is to reduce traffic congestion and increase productivity. It's estimated that traffic congestion costs the country over $10 billion annually in lost productivity. This is why the government should include measures as part of its transit infrastructure program and in collaboration with provinces and municipalities that will favor a modal shift from single occupancy vehicles to active transportation, public transit, car sharing, and carpooling. Effective measures that have been implemented in other countries include fiscal incentives and programs for employees to use transit for their commute to work, as well as mobility pricing. On this last point, we believe that the time is right to initiate a serious and evidence-based discussion with all stakeholders about our overall approach to mobility pricing. Le transport collectif fait aussi progresser le secteur manufacturier au Canada.
Public transit moves the manufacturing sector forward in Canada. Investments in R&D in public transit in particular are essential to maintain a competitive advantage. Despite a difficult economic context, our members have maintained high levels of R&D investment and investment in innovation. They have increased their market share in North America and created industrial clusters in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbia. We encourage the government to support the development of cutting-edge technologies in public transit thanks to a budget for innovation.
A world leader in transit research and innovation. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to answering your question.
Thank you, Ms. Blackstock.
Thank you. So good afternoon, members. It's an honor to be here on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation and in the presence of the National Chief and the other delegates at the table. In 2007, I stood with the Assembly of First Nations and we had to file a human rights complaint against the federal government to get them to treat little children on reserves equally, because the federal government was so substantially and so consciously underfunding these services with dire results, resulting in another generation of First Nations children being unnecessarily separated from their families. A repetition of the dark chapter of residential schools. I would have never anticipated that the federal government would have fought that case so vigorously for 9 years. Fought it when its own document showed that it was providing significantly less to First Nations children than all other children in the country received. Despite its documents showing the perils, the deprival of breathing equipment to 4-year-old little kids because they were First Nations. On January 26th of this year, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal issued a landmark decision, the only decision we know about in the Western industrialized world, that found a federal government racially discriminating against 163,000 First Nations children and ordered it to stop. Like many of you around the table, when the Ministers of Justice and Indigenous Affairs welcomed the decision, I breathed a sigh of relief. And here we are now in September, and the tribunal held jurisdiction over the federal government, concerned as it was of the repeated pattern of the federal government not acting on recommendations that were clearly before it to reform. In April, unsatisfied with the federal government's progress in implementing the decision to stop this racial discrimination against children, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal issued a further compliance order against the federal government and ordered it to implement something called Jordan's Principle immediately so that First Nations children can access government services on the same terms. The timing of April is important because that means that the tribunal had at its disposal Budget 2016. And you'll remember, members, I was here at that time and I said that fell sufficiently short of what was needed. Again, I hope the federal government would move with dispatch to ensure that they followed the law and they remediated racial discrimination against children. But that failed to happen, and on September 16th, a second compliance order has been issued by the federal government for its failure to remediate the discrimination. I think we can all agree around this table it's unconscionable that a nation such as ours that promotes human rights, that values human decency, would racially discriminate against children. But it's also illegal that we have failed to comply, the government has failed to comply with 3 legal orders. So what I'm suggesting to you is not discretionary funding. It is something that the government is under court order to do. The burden is with the federal government to prove that the racial discrimination has stopped. It's not enough to make an announcement. You have to prove that it's actually remediated the discrimination at the level of children. 2 quick points here. I've included a substantial brief citing the decisions and the relevant sections of those decisions, and on the final page of the brief, the action needed. To put it briefly, the Canadian government needs to follow the law. It needs to stop racially discriminating against children. It needs to release, in our estimation for this year alone, the shortfall is $155,000 or $155 million. It also needs to deliver training to senior staff and to members of Parliament on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on these tribunal decisions, so people are in a position to act differently in the spirit of the Prime Minister's commitments towards the calls to action. And remember, this is the #1 call to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The other is that the Government of Canada must fully comply with its definition of Jordan's Principle. Currently, the federal government is using a definition of Jordan's Principle limiting equitable access for children's services only to children with disabilities and critical short-term illnesses. Who in Canada would be willing to have their child only treated equitably if they were so disadvantaged that they had a critical illness and a disability? It makes no sense. And the other piece is that the compliance with the release of the data, the tribunal has found it so difficult to get the data that to support the federal government's contention that it has taken adequate action, that it's actually had to order the federal government to provide that data. The first deadline is this Friday, the second one, October 31st. And just in summary, I'll close right now.
Yes, can I get you to summarize, please?
Just in summary, I think we're better than this as a country, We are better than leaving children behind. And at this committee, your task is to really balance the priorities. But if you choose not to treat children equally, then I want you to consider hardly, what are the children losing to? What's more important than them? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Committee and Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear in front of you today. I bring you greetings from CLC President Hassan Youssef, who wanted to attend but was unable to. The CLC, as you may know, is Canada's largest labour central. It's the national voice, or the voice on national issues for 3.3 million working people in Canada. In July, the CLC made a detailed written submission to the committee's pre-budget consultation. I'm not going to attempt to speak to the full range of issues in that brief, but rather restrict my remarks to 3 areas in the time I have available. The first is green jobs. As you've heard from other witnesses, undoubtedly, the end of the global commodity boom continues to weigh heavily on business investment and hiring in Canada. And Canada's job market has evidently stalled over the past year. At the same time, Canada is not on track to meet its greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets of 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. In the view of the Congress, the Government of Canada has an opportunity to undertake strategic investments to stimulate private investment and employment growth while advancing Canada's effort to meet its GHG reduction targets. Along with its partners in the Green Economy Network, the CLC has proposed a plan to create 1 million climate jobs through strategic investments in public transit, renewable energy, and green building retrofits, ensuring a fair and just transition for workers affected by climate change, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 1/3 over 10 years. An ambitious strategy promoting investment in home and building retrofits, energy efficiency and conservation will generate good jobs. The federal government should work with the provinces and territories to reach agreement on national energy efficiency standards. In our view, the Government of Canada should coordinate an ambitious program of targeted investments over the next 5 years for renewable energy development and infrastructure, with job creation and GHG reduction targets, in order to boost electricity generated from solar, wind, and geothermal energy sources. The federal government should also work with Indigenous, rural, and remote communities to increase access to renewable energy. The CLC calls on the government to collaborate with provincial and municipal governments to form a national commuter and intercity public transportation strategy with predictable long-term funding. We hope that the federal government will soon develop a national framework for pricing carbon and coordinating provincial approaches for reducing emissions. Finally, the government must establish a framework for a fair and just transition for workers and their communities affected by climate change and industrial restructuring accompanying the transition to a low-carbon economy. Turning to the Employment Insurance Program, the CLC welcomed the fact that Budget 2016 eliminated the higher entrance requirement for new and returning workers. But far too many Canadians continue to be unable to access regular and special benefits when they need them. The CLC has consistently supported a single lower national eligibility standard for EI regular benefits with a 360-hour threshold. And it supports the reduction in the 600-hour threshold for access to special benefits. And we recommend that the federal government look at the Quebec Parental Leave Benefit Program in this respect. In the last election, the Liberal Party committed to improved access to compassionate care benefits and an additional $500 million annually in funding under the labour market development agreements with the provinces. Instead of allowing the EI premium rate to fall, we believe that the surplus in the EI account should be directed toward these measures and to support badly needed improvements in access to benefits and in the level of benefits. For my last point, I want to turn to childcare. The CLC supports expanded public investment in affordable, universal, and quality childcare as a way of stimulating economic growth and raising private sector labour productivity growth, while improving child development and labour market outcomes for mothers. High-quality, universal, affordable childcare delivered and managed by public authorities or not-for-profit programs requires stable, predictable funding and solid long-term planning. The federal government should provide long-term, stable federal financing in order to establish a common policy framework. Predictable operational funding provided directly to services will allow provinces to move off of parental fee-based systems and ensure that professional qualified staff are hired and retained. And with that, I'll end my remarks and welcome any questions the committee might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and speak to CFA's recommendations for the 2017 federal budget. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture and its members greatly appreciate the opportunity to highlight how Budget 2017 can help government and industry achieve agriculture's considerable potential. For those that aren't familiar with the CFA, we're an umbrella organization representing more than 200 farm families that operate small businesses and work hard to benefit all Canadians by contributing significantly to the Canadian economy, providing safe and affordable food, and a clean and sustainable environment. Canada's agri-food sector employs 1 in 8 Canadians, with more than 275,000 jobs in primary agriculture alone. Agriculture has proven itself to be a resilient source of growth, contributing over $108 billion to Canada's GDP in 2014. With Canada's small population, vast natural resources, and highly competitive producers, the industry is uniquely positioned to meet the opportunities presented by a global population of 9 billion in 2050 and a domestic consumer base looking for increasingly diverse agri-food products. Canadian farmers are eager to seize the opportunities through an ongoing industry-wide commitment to continuous improvement. In working towards these goals, CFA has identified a series of proposals for the 2017 budget in its written brief, but I'll just touch upon a few key areas today. First, I'll outline the need to modernize provisions within the Income Tax Act to address new pressures facing family farm transfers. Canadian agriculture is in the midst of a major transition, with the average age of farmers now over 54 years old and an estimated $50 billion in increasingly capital-intensive farms likely to change hands over the next decade. This poses new challenges to the continuation of family farming in Canada, a model recognized for sustainable growth, environmental stewardship, and spending within local communities. Effective tax planning is essential to the viability of the next generation of farms as well as those retiring. As part of this planning, family farms continue to incorporate, while changing demographics mean they're unable to necessarily rely on their children to stay on the farm. These pressures also reduce the efficacy of existing provisions within the Income Tax Act that were established to enable family farm transfers. To ensure the industry is well positioned to continue its growth, CFA recommends that the rollover provisions be amended to recognize the full breadth of family relations relied upon to maintain family farms across Canada, and that family farm corporations be provided with a level playing field when transferring their businesses to the next generation, including access to the capital gains exemption and ensuring siblings can access the same provisions as other farm family members. Second, I'll touch on the significant opportunities that clean technologies and innovation present for Canadian agriculture and the support industry requires to capitalize upon them. Canadian agriculture is already focused on building resiliency and adapting to climate change. At the same time, Canadian farms are focused on sustainability, and farmers are busy building the reporting systems to show it. As a result, Canadian producers are a target market for clean technology. Producers continue to make investments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve water quality, and to reduce the use of inputs through precision agriculture. However, further investment in beneficial management practices and tools to illustrate their benefits are needed, such as through environmental farm plans. At the same time, many proven technologies are capital intensive, and without government-backed incentives, they often currently struggle to be seen as a profitable investment. Investments in clean technology, including tax or rebate-based incentives, are needed to make technology more accessible to farmers, to capture greenhouse gases, feed this energy back into the grid, and improve other environmental outcomes. Canadian farmers are similarly motivated to advance the national bioeconomy, using farm wastes in order to produce renewable, high-quality products. Canada has the potential to be an innovator and global leader in this area, but a national strategy, coupled with federal investments in research, commercialization, and incentives are needed. Finally, I'd like to discuss the considerable opportunities agriculture sees in improved international and domestic market development. To leverage these opportunities, industry and government must invest in the development of a strategic market access vision for the sector. This would include a review of emerging market opportunities, regulatory and non-regulatory barriers to trade, and a comprehensive look at infrastructure and broader industry capacity. One example would be labor. CFA believes a long-term plan such as laid out in the Agriculture and Agri-Food Workforce Action Plan is essential to addressing significant labor shortages that constrain our ability to meet long-term trade objectives. By strategically identifying how we can meet these opportunities, we can align efforts through clearly defined roles and timelines for all involved. The investments required to develop such a vision pale in comparison to the long-term benefits that would accrue from the increases in tangible market access. On that note, I'd like to highlight CFA's support for modernization of Canada's internal trade system and emphasize the need for continued investment and federal leadership in continuing its momentum. Once again, I'd like to thank the Chair and the committee members for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bellegarde will conclude with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nista nenaskamun. Nista papixque neheon absisi. No tainan smanento kanaskumtin. Algonquins chenishna beck kanaskumtinoal. Napeokesquep kanaskumtinoal. A little bit in Cree. Very happy to be here. I acknowledge the Creator for this beautiful day. I acknowledge the Algonquin peoples and Anishinaabeg peoples for hosting us here and all the men and women here. My name is Perry Bellegarde, National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, so I greet you all in a humble, respectful way. My comments today, Mr. Chair, start with much of Canada's wealth comes from the resources of this land, wealth that has not been equitably shared despite the sacred promises of treaty and our inherent rights, title, and jurisdiction. Resource development alone is expected to pump $650 billion in Canada's economy over this decade. It's time to rebuild trust with First Nations and foster partnerships with this country, including new fiscal transfer and revenue sharing arrangements. Each federal budget must signal Canada's commitment to a new relationship and to closing the socio-economic gap that exists between Indigenous peoples and the rest of Canada. The significant investments made in Budget 2016 for First Nations people are important commitments, and they represent the first installment towards closing the gap after decades of underfunding and neglect, over 20 years. We all know there's much work to do, and closing that gap will not be done in one fiscal year. It won't be done in 2 fiscal years. You need 5, 10, 15-year strategies in order to close the socioeconomic gap that exists. And you know the gap that I use, like 6th versus 63rd? I don't know if, nodding here, if you don't know what it is, I'll explain it. Canada is rated 6th, according to the United Nations Human Development Index. You apply the same indices to Indigenous peoples, we're 63rd. So it's 6th versus 63rd. And this gap represents everything we talk about: the overcrowded housing, the cap on education, the 1,200 missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, high youth suicide rates, disproportionate number of our people in jails, 132 boil water advisories, cap on education, all the lists. So that's got to be closed. Maintaining the status quo is not in the best interest of this country at all. Now, having said that, investing in Canada's fastest and growing demographic, young First Nations, Indigenous men and women, the fastest growing segment. So the message and theme we continually put out is to start investing in human capital. You're going to reap huge returns on investment if that happens. In fact, studies have shown that if investments were to have been made back in 2001, by 2026, $400 billion in positive growth in GDP would have been added to Canada's economy. And $115 billion in cost savings would have happened if investments would have been made back in 2001. And that's from 2001 up until 2026. Studies have shown that. Investing the wealth that has come from our lands back into our First Nations benefits everyone in Canada. The numbers in the submission should be seen as basements, not ceilings on investment. And there are regions, such as north of 60, those in the northern regions of the provinces. They require particular attention because of the unique challenges they face. Costs of doing business in the north are huge. They're different than in the south. Always got to keep that in mind. There are priorities in this budget coming up, 2017, 2018. Housing and water, no question. Post-secondary education has to be there. First Nations policing has to be there. And what Cindy spoke about, ending discrimination, has to be in there. The child welfare issue, funding still falls short. There is still discrimination. That has to end. New fiscal arrangements and budget decisions must reflect a needs-based approach to closing the gap. We're going to continue to review and revise numbers in light of our growing understanding of the needs, and we'll keep this committee and the finance minister informed as well. Minister Don, we call him the Sunya Ogi Mao, the big money chief. So we have to talk to him. At the AFN, we're going to continue to assist First Nations in working together on common areas of concern to advance common priorities. We also expect that the important work under the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding working towards a new fiscal relationship with the Crown that was signed this summer between myself and Minister Bennett, is going to breathe life. We're going to advance what the Prime Minister said. Long-term, sustainable, predictable funding. We have a long road to go. We're going to close the gap and achieve rights implementation and reconciliation. And we trust great progress can be made in Budget 2017. Egoze.
Thank you. All right, we unfortunately only have about 20 minutes for questions and answers. So again, I would ask everyone to try and be as succinct as you can, and as well witnesses for your answers. So we're going to start with Mr. Falcon Ulat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate each and every one of you coming here today to give your testimony in this hearing. You know, I guess my comments are actually going, and questions are going to be directed towards Perry as well as Cindy. You know, I'm very proud that the government did not continue to fight the Human Rights Tribunal and the First Nations Child and Caring Society. You know, it's fun to see that when you advocate behind the scenes, that sometimes governments can take a step back. And though the road, sometimes we like it to be very short, sometimes it's still long. You know, and I often think about our children, how our Indigenous children have become a form of a natural resource in the child and family services systems in this country. 11,000 kids in care in Manitoba. Some not for the right reasons. 87% are not there because of abuse, but negligence, the inability of parents to provide food and housing for their children. And I think these are telling statistics, and sometimes we think it's easier almost to take the children from the families and give them to someone else to raise, and we provide funds and monies to those children either off reserve or on reserve. But, you know, this is still the present, but it's also the past. I hope it can become the past. But I was wondering, Cindy, if you had solutions that, you know, what should the federal government be doing with the money that we're spending? How can we actually, if you have programs that we could be implementing in order to make this, you know, something really in the past?
I would say very quickly, we're very proactive with the minister. We identified the flaws in each of the funding formulas and the recommendations from prior reports that would have remediated the most egregious effects of the discrimination. We also provided the minister and the departmental staff with examples of programs that have been used in Canada with Indigenous peoples and around the world that have resulted in real safety for families and a decrease in children in care. We don't have time to articulate those now, but I can provide the committee with the examples of those information sheets. And I certainly would welcome any offline conversations. In terms of the work there, I would just say that it's important. I appreciate that the government didn't appeal those decisions, but they haven't complied with them either. And I'm looking forward to that happening very quickly.
Just quickly, Chair, as well, in addition to what Cindy said, there's two processes going on. FPTI process, Federal Provincial Territorial and Indigenous Forum, where Carolyn Bennett chairs that forum with the other chair from Ontario, trying to find ways to fix the on-reserve child and family service system. You're going to need fiscal resources there. That's one, on reserve. The other one is the Council of the Federation when we meet the premiers. And we got them to agree, because there's 40,000 children, First Nations children in foster care in the provincial systems. So that has to be fixed as well. On reserve, off reserve. So now we've got processes going on. You know, you have to look at the fiscal resource piece on the reserve, but as well you have to look at the jurisdictional pieces and look at how do you extend First Nations jurisdiction into the provincial systems. So it's almost supporting 10 or 13 provincial FedProv First Nation systems going right across Canada. Because you can't just deal with the on-reserve system, you got to look at the provincial systems. And we got buy-in last year at July at the Council of Federation, and we got to keep getting those systems working. It's not just on the res, off reserve too.
Just one final thing. I think from what I hear and having talked to the Minister Bennett, is I think it would be appropriate for her not just simply go to Indigenous and Northern Affairs Standing Committee, but I think because they are dealing with such an important issue, and Cindy was here last year talking about this, that I think she should come at some point to testify and answer questions here. And I think she would be amenable to that. And I hope my fellow committee members would be willing to eventually call the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs to answer for the amounts of money and the future programming that's going on, because I think it's such an important issue. And it's worthy of greater insight from people who perhaps don't have that expertise, but who I'm sure are very interested in this as well.
Okay, thanks, Robert. We move to Mr. McColman.
Well, thank you, the witnesses, for being here. I'm sorry,
Phil. Before we continue, the bells are going, so I need unanimous consent from the committee to carry on. Do I have that? Okay, thank you.
What time are we sitting for?
Roughly 5:45.
Okay. So we have 15 minutes to get to the House.
That's right.
Okay.
Sorry?
5:55.
5:55? Oh, well, then we have to get out here slightly before that.
Okay. I'll try to be very brief and give some time to my colleague to my left here, Mr. Angus.
Far left.
You and I know that, Charles. Education is transformative. There is no question. I happen to represent the largest First Nation in Canada, Six Nations of the Grand. And I've watched the growth of Six Nations Polytechnic and the work that they've been doing to take their youth and build strong individuals through education. So I want to concentrate on that focus because, Ms. Robinson, your proposals to the government, I think, have a lot of merit, both in Indigenous communities and non-Native communities. And I think that as I look at this, there's one question I have, and you have in your bullet points, you never did get to your recommendations, but it says to fund a center of excellence for vocational training. Do you have any conceptual work done on that, how much the cost is, and where that might be located?
Thank you very much. You know, I am sort of agnostic as who's doing the learning. So we all need to be learning. And I'm actually, the part that I'm passionate about is that we need applied learning. and polytechnics deliver that. But when you think of the word apprenticeship, which is work-based learning, it's actually got so much more promise when it's funded at 1/5 of what we support a post-secondary student with. So in Canada, with our terrible sort of jurisdictional challenges that we've had for the 150 years, apprenticeship is delivered in disparate ways by trade across the provinces. It is an old system. What we're proposing is to consolidate a lot of the learnings as well as the best practices, as well as bring employers closer to apprentices through a center of excellence that is focused on apprenticeship and vocational training. We have a brief which I would happily submit. The idea is actually one of the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum's inception. It's their idea. But we are a patron member of that institution, and we think the federal government can scale up, consolidate, and actually show across jurisdictions improvement in the delivery of skills training.
And I might just pass that question along to Chief Bellegarde. In terms of how you weigh the generational change that needs to happen with all of the things for your for Indigenous people, how important is that education transformation for you?
It's huge. What's the best way out of poverty? Good education, you know. But we say, as Indigenous peoples, we walk in both worlds, and so we need to be strong on literacy and numeracy, and science and math and all the above. But as equally important, on the other hand, is our languages and our ceremonies and our traditions and our customs. Balancing, walking in both worlds. And we need investments from K to 12, but we also need investments in post-secondary education. We have 10,000 students on the wait list, and that has to be addressed in this upcoming budget. But again, finding that balance, walking in both worlds, and that's why we support the Six Nations Polytechnic Institute, the First Nations University of Canada, because again, it's Indigenous learning, Indigenous knowledge, it's walking in both worlds, so it's key. It's a way out of poverty.
Thank you.
We're going to move then to the far left with Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here, and National Chief. I want to begin. We've lost 3 young people in Pakanchikam this week, the youngest being 13. We've lost a lot of young people, fallen through the cracks. We had Health Canada at our committee, and I asked them about the denial rates of children needing mental health services, and I asked them if they tracked how many times they denied children, and they said, of course they do. And then when we went to try and find that data, they admitted that they actually don't track how many times they deny children or young people needing mental health services. I raise that, Ms. Blackstock, because we have a government that's ignored 2 compliance orders and are refusing to turn over data to the tribunal. How can a government make a financial claim that it's responding to children in need, Indigenous children, if either they don't track the data or they're refusing to turn it over?
They cannot. And as I said, the burden is on the federal government to prove to the tribunal that it is mitigated the discrimination. Without data, they cannot make that case.
Thank you. This summer, the government announced through all their announcements of $7 billion spent on projects this summer. They included tennis courts, flagpoles, $30 billion deficit. It sounds like money's getting out the door. But I notice, Madame Blackstock, you say that we're $155 million short for children, Indigenous children. And Chief Bellegarde, that the feds have only spent 1% of the budget so far on Indigenous needs. The year's chugging along here. What is that gap that they could put so much money out the door and think they could leave Indigenous communities behind?
Just a quick comment. On the $8.4 billion, we are very happy, with that start. It's better than Kelowna. And when I go to our communities across Canada, what I hear from our chiefs, well, you can't jump up on pedestal, Bellegarde, for that 8.4, neither can Lip, because we're not seeing it out in the communities. So we're already into the second quarter. So we are trying to work with and put enough pressure as we can to get the dollars flowing so that they do have impacts on the ground, on housing, on education, and in water. That's the big push we have to do, and we've got to push INAC to find more effective ways internally. And a lot of it comes down to the bureaucracy. So we've got to find ways to improve the bureaucracy, to get decisions made quicker. That's one point. On the bigger piece, there's got to be a policy change between Finance and Treasury Board so that monies don't lapse, so that stupid decisions aren't made in February and March. Oh, spend before the end of the fiscal year. You know, that you should change the policy so there's no fear of losing it, so you can carry it over into the next fiscal year. So if it's there for water or housing, it's still there next fiscal year, and you don't make silly decisions before it's terminated. So change the policy.
And Ms. Blackstock, on the $155 million shortfall to Indigenous children, when we have a $30 billion deficit that's being raised?
I think I ended my remarks by saying if you choose not to comply with the law and if you choose not to eliminate the racial discrimination, then what are the children losing to? According to that report, it's flagpoles and tennis courts. And I think we owe children much more than that.
And my final question is that we see that the government is still fighting Indigenous children health care. They spent enormous amounts of money on previous cases to deny children with severe needs to keep their families from getting it. We have a case now of a young Cree girl. Can you talk about the difficulties of families actually taking the federal government to court in terms of getting their rights respected?
In that particular case, a girl required medical treatment so that she could eat and talk without chronic pain. Was assessed by 2 pediatric specialists who said that that was required. It would have cost $8,000. The government of Canada refused to pay that, and they've now spent $32,000 in litigation against that teenager. I spoke to the mom yesterday. She's relying on volunteer legal counsel, and I used my own personal air miles to fly her lawyer out so she could meet with her. That's the balance of injustice. I don't understand as a taxpayer why we didn't spend $8,000 for kids to be able to talk and eat properly without chronic pain. And, you know, I understand the floodgates arguments, but if there's other children out there that can't eat or talk properly without chronic pain, they're welcome to all my tax dollars.
Thank you very much.
With that, unfortunately, I'm going to have to conclude the discussion. Mr. Ross, Mr. Roberts, and Mr. Leclerc want you to know that your presentations were no less important just because we ran out of time and didn't get to you asking questions. So thank you for all of you for being here. I've been asked to remind all members there's a bus outside the door at 5:45, and the clerk did order pizza for later. It's there if you want to grab one on the way out the door. Meeting adjourned.